Hi, everybody. This is John Wake with realestateDecoded.com. I got a really cool interview today with Gary Lucido. He's with Lucid Realty in Chicago, and he's got a really well-known blog called Getting Real. It's on the ChicagoNow.com website, so check that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, first, he's done a lot of super creative, super original stuff with his real estate business, and then we're going to talk about the Chicago real estate market, and then we're going to end up talking about the Illinois real estate purchase contract, because every state is different, and it's kind of cool if you're buying or selling from a different state coming into or out of Chicago to know some of the differences in the customs and what's customary and what the contract is in Illinois. So great, Gary, thanks for coming. I really, really appreciate you coming today.
Well, thanks for the call. I'm looking forward to this.
Good. So I can see from the sign behind you that you do full service plus discount commissions, and you that's why I saw, well, I love your website, and you're doing so much creative stuff. It seems like you're trying lots of new stuff. So maybe you could just run through some of the original things you're doing to buy and sell, helping your clients buy and sell real estate.
Yeah, well, we believe that full service is not inconsistent with low cost. My partner and I both come from outside the real estate industry. We had both had dealings with the real estate industry in the past, and felt that there was a lot lacking in terms of service, and the fees were too high. And so we set out to come up with a model that could solve both of those problems. So what we do is we discount our commission for sellers, and we offer our buyers a rebate. Both are on a sliding scale. So the more expensive the home is, the lower the commission, the higher the rebate. And that's because, let's face it, $1 million home does not require twice the work of a $500,000 home. Mm-hmm. It is more work, but not twice the work. So our commission structure and our rebate structure reflect that.
Well, let's talk about buyers. Do you have an upfront cost or anything when you're working with buyer clients?
No. We actually work with buyers two different ways. One way is that we offer them a rebate, and it's on a sliding scale. As long as they are spending more than $200,000, we will give them a rebate, basically sharing our commission with them. And that is probably the most popular option for our buyers. But we also offer our buyers an option whereby we actually will give them 100% of the commission back, but they have to pay us by the hour. And so what we do there is, in that case, there's what they do is they deposit some funds with us. We ask for a $500 retainer, and we basically bank that, and then we charge our time against that bank. So currently, we charge $100 an hour. We will probably very soon raise that to $125 an hour. And I would say that pretty much everybody who's chosen that option has ended up way better off than if they had gone with the traditional rebate. Now, the premise, though, is that you're one of those buyers that knows what they're doing, you're decisive, you don't need a lot of hand-holding, and those are the kind of people that gravitate towards that model. But we've written rebate checks as high as $56,000.
Holy mackerel. That's wild. So that's pretty unique. I know that a lot of people I've seen a lot of doing discounting, but not this by hour. I haven't seen so much of that. That's kind of unique. How did you pick up that idea?
It's interesting. I participate in some online forums, some blogs, and we were exchanging comments. There was a rather dedicated group to this one particular blog. And we were exchanging comments, and we were talking about how the real estate commission is so high. And I noted that to a large extent, it's high because there are a lot of buyers and sellers that are very high maintenance. And so basically the low maintenance clients are subsidizing the high maintenance clients. And so then the conversation evolved. And, somebody suggested, I don't know if it was me or if it was somebody else on the forum, they suggested that realtors should charge by the hour. And I said, I doubt anybody would be interested in that. And then all of a sudden, one of the people in the forum contacted me privately and said, well, I'd like to do it. And so he was my first hourly buyer. And actually, I worked with that guy on a very low-key basis for about 3 or 4 years. Did not burn a lot of money. He ended up buying a home a little over $1 million. He saved a ton of money. I mean, the rebate for him was, had to be at least $25,000. And I think the total fee paid to us was probably somewhere around $5,000 or $6,000. And you know what? I'm fine with that, because if they don't use up, I'm all about maximizing the value of our time. And as long as I get paid for our time, what do I care?
Yeah, that's the killer when you have a buyer and you keep thinking at the beginning it's all a honeymoon and you're thinking, oh, this is going to work out. Then after a while you're thinking, oh, are they going to buy? And I got time. I've spent 20 hours and I've spent 40 hours. And are they? It's taking away from other clients that might be. So you get this dilemma where, in this case, if they're paying by the hour, that would mean they're serious. They know they don't need a lot of help. They chose that. So they know the drill, and they just need somebody, I suppose, to draft the contract, show them a few homes, and they don't waste your time when it's costing them money. So that's super, super intriguing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's worked out really well for us.
Okay, so, and you like it as well, not just your clients. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, we obviously don't make on average, we don't make as much money on those deals as we would if they were going the traditional route. Mm-hmm. But like I said, we're getting a good return on our time.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's talk about your seller clients and how you handle them. You do the two different options or something else?
We have sold homes on an hourly basis as well. In that case, we not only charge by the hour, but we also charge them for out-of-pocket expenses. So we would charge them for signage, brochures, photographs, things like that. But otherwise, we charge, on a sliding scale. The higher the price of the home, the lower the commission. We do not discount the co-op commission. We sort of feel like that's dangerous territory, so we don't recommend.
Oh, I see.
We don't recommend discounting that, but we do discount our portion of the commission, and we're still full service.
So what's the custom that the seller's agent will offer a buyer's agent in Chicago area?
Yeah, I would say that, of course, there is no standard rate, but I would say that I would say most of the listings out there, it's about 2.5%. Sometimes you'll see 3%. Sometimes you'll see 2.5 plus like a bonus, and then sometimes you'll see it cut thinner than that, 2.25%, 2%. But that's pretty rare. Most of the time, it's 2.5%.
Here in Arizona, our prices aren't as high, but generally it's 3%, and sometimes you'll see 2.5%. But it could be anything. But those are the two most common by far. It would be 3% and then 2.5%.
Yeah,
offered to the buyer's agent.
Yeah, my sense from looking at other markets is that Chicago commissions tend to be lower in general.
That's wild. So I'm really liking. So what? Let me some more. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea of doing the discount. So it's based on the price of what the home they're selling, a certain amount, and then you just lower your commission that amount. You don't lower the commission going to the co-broke to the buyer's agent.
Right.
And other than that, it's pretty much a standard a contract with the seller.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Anything else you can tell me about that? How people how is it catching on? Is it hard to sell people on that? Do they not get it because it's so new?
Yeah, that's interesting. A couple of interesting observations there. The kind of people that gravitate towards this model tend to be sophisticated. They tend to be more highly intelligent, highly educated. I would say we see a disproportionate number of attorneys, doctors, people in the finance industry, hedge fund managers, maybe quants that work in the hedge fund industry, computer programmers. It tends to skew younger. I will tell you that the and in our price points, I mean, we have done deals, above $2 million. We don't do as many of those. I would say that, looking at other players out there that are discounting, I would say that the inroads are being made more at the lower price points, which is interesting. My personal belief is that the older person with a more expensive condo, maybe, or a more expensive house, may be more traditional. They may see the world, through more traditional eyes. They're a little bit more skeptical. They have a unjustified belief that, there are these market experts out there, neighborhood experts, whatever, that are somehow going to get them more money for their house or their condo if they're listing it. That's ludicrous. Because if you try to pin them down, well, specifically, what are they going to do differently? You can never get an answer. Never.
Yeah, I'm writing a post on that right now. So at the end of this, we're going to give you your contact information, and then I'll put your contact information on the bottom of everything. So if anybody wants to buy or sell a home with you, they can contact you in Chicago. But let's move on to the Chicago real estate market right now. I know, in my opinion, there's nobody better in analyzing the Chicago real estate market than you. Although I'm a long ways away, I've looked at everything I could in Chicago, and you seem to be by far the most analytical. You're not a everything is awesome guy. You're showing both sides of the market, the good and the bad. So, wonder if you could fill me in on Chicago's been kind of one of the worst markets in some ways in the United States. It hasn't bounced back as much.
Yeah, if you look at I track a number of statistics. I'm sure you're familiar with the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, and although Chicago home prices have gone up quite a bit, they clearly have not. Well, we're lagging the other 19 metro areas. We've more than several of the past months, we've fallen either in last place or second to the last place. I think Detroit may have beat us out in last place last month. So our prices have been going up. I think home prices, according to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, might be up, 1%. Sales are up. Sales have recovered quite a bit. I obviously have a lot of graphs on my blog. Sales have recovered considerably. I think September might have had the highest sales in nine years.
Whoa.
But then October, I just reported on October, and then October was only the third highest of the last 3 years. It's still up considerably from the housing bust, but not as good as the 2 prior years. Yeah,
so, I follow a lot of different markets, but I can't figure out Chicago. I can't figure out why they're lagging compared to everyone else. It seems like the economy's doing well. I don't know.
Well, so I actually posted a blog on this, a post yesterday that attempts to look at this. Chicago is not one monolithic market. It's a lot of different markets by income demographic, by price of the home. So the more expensive neighborhoods have done really well. For instance, the statistic I looked at in yesterday's post was what's happened with distressed property sales, short sales, and REOs. And so the most expensive neighborhood in Chicago, Lincoln Park, I think the distressed property sales were never more than 20% of the total sales. And so it went up to that level, and it's already down to near zero. But then you've got a market like the South Loop, where there was a lot of excess inventory, and I think the distressed property sales peaked maybe 40%. Now they're also down close to zero right now. Then there's a community on the very southeast corner of Chicago where the distressed property sales peaked at 70%,
Yikes.
and it still hasn't recovered.
Whoa.
It's still running like 40% there. So there are a lot of, there are neighborhoods where you can buy homes for, single family homes for $140,000 in Chicago. They're not very, they need a lot of work, but, and then you've got neighborhoods where you can't touch a home for under $1 million.
Did you do judicial foreclosures in Illinois? Or?
Yes. And because of that, it takes forever for them. I think it takes like 2 years for a foreclosure to go through.
Okay. So still, they should be catching up by now.
Well, in total, the share of distressed property sales is way down from the peak. But clearly, many neighborhoods have done better than others.
I saw something recent on Chicago. They looked at the total number of new homes built at the peak and then at the trough, and there was no of the 20 the major markets was reduced more than Chicago. It fell like 90% the new home construction in the metropolitan area. So that I don't know what that means, but anyway, that shows that it was really hurt. So
now, new construction in Chicago has come back with a vengeance.
Okay.
They're building a lot of single family homes. They're putting those homes in, to keep them affordable, they're putting them in more of the up and coming neighborhoods. So there's some gentrification occurring on the outskirts of the neighborhoods that have already gentrified. And then you've got quite a bit of high rise construction in the city with condos, and then you have apartments being built as well. And, there's a question as to whether or not the market can absorb all this.
Yeah, I was hearing that nationally the apartment construction seems to be leveling off. So it'll be, they may be reaching a peak, or this could be the peak as far as apartment construction nationally anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody needs to buy or in Chicago, then they can talk to you. You can fill them in on, it seems like you're totally a neighborhood expert and can fill them in on the different areas of town, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, the last thing that I want to talk about is the Illinois contract. So let's start with one of the major differences in different parts of the country. In the East, maybe from Chicago East, they tend to use attorneys. The Northeast, I don't know if the Florida doesn't, maybe not Georgia. But then in the West, they tend not to use attorneys. So talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old and explain to me how the attorney thing works. They're doing the title clearing stuff, or they're like what would be a title company we would use in the West would be a title company would do that. And also the title company is like the unbiased third party looking at the contract here in the West. So how does that work? So you draw up an offer, or buyer and seller come to an agreement. They have a completed contract. What happens with the contract then?
Yeah, then it goes into attorney review, which is typically 5 business days, during which you can get your inspection. The attorneys then
this is going to both attorneys. Is going to the buyer's attorney and the seller's attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the attorneys actually serve 3 functions in my mind. Let's start at the top. You mentioned the title work. We obviously have title companies here in Chicago, but the seller's attorney will typically work as the agent of the title company in terms of doing the title search work. And they get compensated separately from the title company for doing that. And I don't know the exact amount, but it's my understanding that it's considerably more than the amount they might charge the seller. Attorneys, I would say that the typical attorney in Chicago, whether it's a buyer or working on the buy side or the sell side, they are probably charging anywhere from $500 to $700. Okay. I mean, you'll find some that'll go below $500, but most of the ones I work with are at least $500. Okay. So then the seller's attorney also does the title work, and they get paid additionally for that work
from the title company.
Right. So then the attorneys also hash through issues. So they review the contract, and if there's anything that they feel needs to be addressed, like a lot of attorneys are not happy with all the boilerplate wording. So they send out, they might send out, like the seller's attorney might send out a letter with like 6 or 7 bullet points of additional things they want, in terms of the kind, or the buyer's attorney might do the same thing. Any issues that come up as a result of the inspection, like property tax issues, the attorneys work that out. The other thing that the attorneys do in Illinois is they actually manage the timeline, because there are certain deadlines specified in the contract as to like when the when the mortgage application will be submitted, when it'll go to underwriting, when the commitment will come back. There are deadlines. And so the buyer's attorney has to make sure that the buyer is meeting those deadlines, and the seller's attorney is also making sure that the buyer is meeting those deadlines. So they do that, and then they schedule the closing.
So how does it normally go? Let's say the seller's attorney says, we should include these 8 bullet points, and then the buyer's attorney looks at it and says, yeah, I'll take 1 through 4, but not 5 through 8. How's that sound? And so they negotiate between themselves on the final language for the contract?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when it comes to, so they schedule the closing, and at the closing, the seller never shows up. The seller's attorney will be there. The buyer's attorney will be there going through all the documents that the buyer has to sign. And I've actually counted the number of signatures required by a buyer, and it was around, I'm not exaggerating, it was around 55. And the stack of paper is like, it's like, literally this thick. So
a friend of mine who's a real estate attorney, a real estate agent here, Kristen Levanway, calls that, you'll sign your signature until your hands bleed.
Yeah, and so a good buyer's attorney will go through every document and explain to the buyer what they're signing.
So at the closing table, there's a seller's attorney, the buyer's attorney, plus the buyers, but not the sellers, typically. Right. Okay, good.
And so basically that's the role of the attorney. So you would think, I come from that background. So when it came time to sell my parents' house in Dallas, and we did it, they don't use attorneys there, and I did not understand how it could possibly happen without attorneys, and somehow it did, and it was painless. I don't know how they do it.
So a lot of the stuff that the attorneys do ends up being pushed onto the real estate agents. In essence, my father was a real estate agent, and there was a big, what would you call it, referendum or something on the ballot in the 1960s to make it so that you didn't have to use an attorney. I remember he was all excited about that it passed, that you no longer had to use a real estate attorney in Arizona. So, okay, good. Well, let me talk about some other neat details in the contract. I was talking to some guys in really hot markets. That's not you or me, but like in Seattle, is really hot. He said they were doing pre-inspections because they were getting so many offers and so many people wanted to do inspections. They started doing inspections of the home. The seller would pay for the inspection, and then they wanted to get a contract that didn't have an inspection contingency, ideally. We don't do that here typically. How about in Chicago? No.
No, we don't do. I mean, I've heard of people doing it. It doesn't sound like a very interesting or a very good idea. If I was a buyer, I wouldn't believe the seller's inspection report. I want to pick the inspector.
Right. That only works in a super hot market, or it seems to.
Maybe
show up in a super hot market. How about the appraisals? Anybody ever do? This is not common here either, but pre-appraisals before they put it on the market, like a FSBO, for example. And I guess your situation could facilitate that because you're doing pricing by the hour. So they could get pricing information from you, or they decide that's part of your hourly fee, or they could pay for an appraisal before they would list it. Anything there?
Yeah, so I would say that's that's still pretty rare. It's probably more common than a pre-sale inspection. However, I mean, some sellers will bring it up. I always discourage it because, frankly, I think the appraisal process is a crapshoot. I've seen some really terrible appraisals. I've written blog posts on them, in fact, which opened up a real firestorm of comments from appraisers out there.
So that's on Getting Real on ChicagoNow.com. Okay.
Yes. And so anyway, the things that I've noticed about appraisals is sometimes they'll bring an appraiser in from really far away.
Yeah, that's killer. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll be trying to do an appraisal on a condo downtown. They won't adjust properly for the floor, the floor number. They won't adjust for whether it's a corner unit or a regular side unit. They may not adjust for the view or the exposure.
Yeah.
They may not even adjust for small differences in square footage where, the square footage could be $500 a square foot or more in downtown Chicago. And yet they may not make an adjustment for a 100 square foot difference.
Wow.
So I've seen a lot of things like that. They're overly influenced by square footage. They're not influenced enough by the quality of the finishes. So I don't put a lot of stock in appraisals.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about earnest money. The contract here has it that the earnest money in Arizona doesn't go hard. Basically, it favors the buyer. The buyer can pretty much cancel within the last 3 days and still get their money back. California's default language has it that the earnest money is supposedly supposed to go hard or non-refundable after 17 days. Do you guys fall in between those two as far as earnest money?
Yeah, so the way it works is you put down some initial earnest money.
Oh, what's common? What's acceptable for earnest money percentage?
Well, what's common is $1,000.
Wow, that's not much.
And which I just think it's trivial.
It is.
I mean, especially you'll see $1,000 on $1 million house.
Wow.
And I don't personally get that. But that's very common. And
I thought Arizona was low compared to California, but gosh, we're higher than you guys for sure.
What do people typically put down?
Here 1%, but in California 1% would be like the absolute positive minimum. 1% is customary, or like the seller's not going to be insulted if the buyer puts 1% down.
Well, okay, so that's to start though. Okay, because then what happens is once you get out of attorney review, there is typically an escalation of the earnest money.
This is great.
I'm sorry, what?
This is great. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, so once you get out of attorney review, then, and this is all specified in the contract, typically the buyer will put down some additional earnest money. Now, as a seller's agent, I would like to see at least 3%.
Yeah, that's more like California. Okay.
Yeah, but, sometimes people will just put down $5,000, or $10,000 or some fixed amount, $20,000, whatever. Some people, if they're trying to show their commitment to the property, they may put 5%, 10% down, whatever. There are specified conditions under which the buyer, in theory, should, and I emphasize in theory, should be able to get their earnest money back.
Okay.
So for instance, if they can't come to agreement on the inspection issues, later in the contract, after the earnest money has escalated, in theory, you can get your money back if you fail to get a mortgage. Okay? The thing is, where it gets tricky is that in order to a lot of the agents, myself included, we hold the earnest money.
You hold it. Wow. Here it's almost always title companies. Anyway.
Yeah. So I would say most, although it seems to be a diminishing number, most real estate brokerages here will hold earnest money, but we cannot release it without the signatures of both seller and buyer on a form. So even though the buyer may be entitled to get their money back, the seller could refuse to return it. And
Wow.
then the buyer's only recourse is to sue the seller.
Oh my gosh.
That happens very rarely,
Hmm.
but it does happen.
So let's say somebody is 3 days before closing, they say, "Oh, turns out I couldn't get a loan. I'm sorry. It's been in escrow for 30 days or whatever." Um, the seller's upset. So what happens? This is just you guys
Well,
hold on to the earnest money for months until they come to an agreement?
the seller could, in theory, refuse to return the earnest money. They would, I mean, for failure to get a mortgage, it would be hard for the seller to defend themselves in court as to why they refused to return the earnest money. You know, it's more likely that there would be an issue regarding like if they fail to come to agreement on inspection issues.
Okay.
That is a more likely scenario under which a seller might refuse to return the earnest money.
Okay. And in that case, the inspections were done during the 5-day attorney review typically, so they haven't escalated the earnest money that much
Right.
in many
And keep
cases.
in mind that the escrow holder, if the two parties can't come to agreement, it just sits in escrow forever. Eventually, it gets turned over. Eventually, it gets turned over to the state.
What a mess. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, let me do one more thing. As a home warranties. Here, for example, in Arizona, it's really common that the seller will pay for a home warranty for the benefit of the buyer. I was talking to Craig Glazer. He's a real estate attorney in California. He says in his area, which is more like the Bay Area, it's more typical that the buyer's agent will buy a home warranty for the benefit of the buyer. Is there any custom there in Chicago regarding home warranties?
Well, sellers will sometimes throw that in to sweeten the pot. My buyers don't typically get very excited about that. I don't get excited about that. By the way, I should just tell you that by way of some background, you're talking to a guy who used to manage the extended service plan program at Circuit City stores.
Oh,
I have some experience in the field, but it doesn't take a lot of experience to realize that you're basically buying an insurance policy.
mm-hmm.
And on average, the insurance company makes money. So the cases where you want to buy or own a home warranty is really what's called adverse selection, when you know something that the insurance company doesn't. So if you walk through the house and you can tell that it's not very well maintained, that's when you might want to have a home warranty.
Yeah, I think where it's so common here in Arizona is that the errors and omission insurers are pushing brokerages to do that. Obviously, it may affect their errors and omission costs if a lot of the brokerages are having. So if you have a $500 problem, it just gets fixed and nobody goes to court.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the thing. Cool. Well, I really appreciate your time, Gary. Anything else I should know about before we sign off here?
No, I guess not. But it was good talking to you. I appreciate the call.
Good. So how can people contact you, Gary?
Well, they can call me directly. My phone number is 312-738-0232. They can email me at glucido@lucidrealty.com. And of course, they can go to our website, which is lucidrealty.com.
So if somebody just has a question, they're thinking about maybe selling someday, they can just call you and you can chat them up and give them some advice and put them in the right direction, free of charge.
I get those calls all the time.
Yeah, good. Well, great, Gary. I really appreciate it. I owe you a big one. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much.